This is something different. This is the DarkFlash DY470. Now, obviously there is a white one, but today we will solely concentrate on the black one. And actually, we did not have anything from DarkFlash on the table until now. Don't get me wrong, I knew who they were and that they did stuff. I just didn't think that there would be like 7+ pages worth of PC cases alone. Anyway, let's take a first look at the DY470, see what you can do inside of it, and try to figure out what weird obsession DarkFlash has with avoiding right angles. By definition, this would count as a mid-sized dual-chamber fish tank style of case. Yeah, I know, a whole lot of words. Wait until you hear about the size. At the longest point, the case stands 498mm high, 310mm wide, and 452mm deep. And that is solely at the maximum of each length. Because in fact, if I would choose a word to describe this case, it would be angle. Everywhere. This thing is angled. The front glass might be partially straight, but there is an angle right next to it. The feet, angled. Here, here, and here. You thought the top was straight, think again. Angled. It's a design choice. You may like it or not, that's really up to you. All I can say is that the angles look, let's say, well planned and executed. There is no thinner or thicker gap in between the panels. Everything aligns the way that it should. I see this like, for example, car designs. You can have dozens of bends or curves in a car door, but at the point where the front and back door align, the gap needs to be unicized all across the board. And in fact, every gap all around the thing has to be unicized. For this one, DarkFlash did that. Ignoring the angle party for a minute, there is something else special about this case. The front and left side panels are made out of glass, nothing out of the usual for nowadays, just that they use like 4mm thick, slightly tinted tempered glass, very good quality. Or no, let's talk about this. With the glass, you can already see that DarkFlash has put some thought and a certain level of quality into this. To remove the left panel, there are 2 catching screws in the back, combined with a pop mechanic, nice and strong, I like that. The front glass is a little bit different. This one is screwed in below the top panel, which is just hooked in using another 2 matching screws, just pull it to the back and off it goes. But back to the glass, once you remove the screws in the top and in the bottom, you can just, pull it off. And there is another angle. Now what I'm talking about is this. This kinda shocked me. This is a piece of rubber. Nothing out of the usual. I have this lying around in a spool, but the purpose of this is vibration absorption, and I might be exaggerating here a bit. If so, then it is because I just wrapped up my script on the Corsair 3500X before working on this one, and you get a certain tunnel vision once you see a lot of mistakes. But DarkFlash seems to have installed this rubber here in case the fans on the side or even at the top are vibrating so strong that the vibration travels through the metal and then creates a rattling noise in between the glass and metal. And me being somebody who just witnessed the absolute peak of how manufacturers can cut costs, I think this is amazing. The motivation to make sure that the one person out there that might experience this rattling noise doesn't get it. Even if adding this adds manufacturing steps and therefore also costs. Yes, I know it's just a few cents per unit, if we're being honest here, but still, it's a thoughtful step. And of course, angles. I kid you not, the edge where the 2 side panels are coming together is angled. Listen, this is cool, like very, very cool detail. But why? And we are not done, because the top panel is actually a composition of 2. On the right side, we got the plastic shroud that we just removed, where you also find a fabric dust filter. And on the left side, we got another piece of glass, which is angled. Of course, you can remove this part too. Once the front glass is out, you got the 2 screws at each end of the glass and off it goes. But what the hell? And I had the case standing around for a week or so, and I gotta say, having that additional glass here does give it a, let's say, previously unseen look into the case without having the whole top just be made out of glass, because cases like that exist too, but it is definitely, or at least it is something different. It does come at a cost. I don't know if you've noticed, but both parts of the top panel are angled, aka you got a roof. And not a symmetrical one, but this case has a freaking roof. This of course means that you cannot put anything onto your PC, and unfortunately, as for my job description, I am not allowed to nag about that fact, because otherwise I would suggest that resting your coffee mug on your PC is an acceptable move, which very clearly it is not, so let's just move on. On the inside, we get the usual mid-tower fish tank level of compatibility. Motherboard-wise, we are looking at the usual suspects, mini ITX up to regular ATX, a CPU air cooler which can be up to 175mm high, so rather AIO friendly if you are thinking about like giant D15 G2s. And GPU gets the usual fish tank treat as well, up to 450mm long cores until you start hitting the front glass. But thanks to the build style, we got about 19cm worth of GPU depth, which is a hell of a lot, so no worries about the flaming NVIDIA Octopus adapter. Behind the back panel, which by the way has a mesh structure for the PSU and the fans, anyway, behind that one we will find a panel. This is what DarkFlash lovingly describes as an elegant cable management panel, or in my words, do whatever the hell you want, stuff the hell out of it, and then just squeeze it shut. It's not like anybody's going to see it anyway. Ignoring that lovely description, the panel is screwed in towards the front of the case, 2 screws, and then you can just pivot it slightly out and just pull it out. Behind that one, we will then find the PSU and drive compartment. The PSU goes into the top. Technically, we got about 300mm worth of space before we start hitting the end of that area, but try to keep it around 200 to have some cable stuffing area. It's not like 250 plus PSUs are easy to come by anyway. Right underneath we got the hard drive cage, in which we can stuff up to 2 3.5-inch drives and a 2.5-inch drive. And now coming to the fan and radiator support, where I think nobody ever told DarkFlash that 140mm fans exist. I kid you not, there is not a single one. Not a single bracket supports 140mm fans. And it's not like there are a few fan spots in general. No, this case has plenty of fans, just like no 140s. We got a total of 10 spots, 3 in the bottom, 3 in the top, 3 on the side, and the last one in the back. By default, the back spot is pre-filled with DarkFlash's own INF 34 120mm fan, and the 3 sidewise intake fans are pre-filled with the same INF 34 120mm fan, but with reverse spinning blades. All of them up to 2000 RPM quick spinning fans, pushing up to 50.43 CFM and up to 2.27mm of H2O. Now, and PVM of course, and they are not amazing, but they are not bad either. And as far as like free fans go, this is certainly more than you could expect with the average case. The one thing I really want to give DarkFlash some credit here for is they did not use a cheaper boiled down version of the fan they are already selling, like I have seen manufacturers do all the time. No, this is the actual fan that you can get as a product, including the daisy chaining feature and the somewhat infinity mirror, which is basically invisible because it is hidden by the second metal front panel. It seems kinda unnecessary to have that here, but on the flip side, DarkFlash didn't cut any corners, so that, yeah. Radiator-wise, I think the case shines most. There are technically 3 spots, an up to 360 red in the top, an up to 360 red on the side, and an up to 360mm red in the bottom. Well, actually, you can also get a 120 in the back, but who really does that? And the bottom one might restrict your access to all the bottom I/O of your motherboard, so maybe don't use that one, but technically 360s would be possible here. The top one supports an up to 40mm thick radiator or 65mm worth of red and fan combo. After that you will start getting dangerously close to the motherboard. But the cool thing about this is that it is angled, of course it is, and it does look kind of cool. And it combines well with the angled motherboard panel behind it. Now, the fact that it's angled won't really give it any performance benefit, not at all. You could argue that the angle helps to travel the air around the GPU from the bottom in and then goes around and out in the top. But that's like mental gymnastics 101. Let's be honest, this is more show off, and if you like that, good for you. The second radiator spot is on the side. Actually, here we got potentially 2, because there is so much space between the back panel and the panel for the fans that we can squeeze an up to 40mm thick radiator right in there, which might look cool in case you wanted to hide the thing as much as possible and only have the fans visible. That works here. And of course, as long as your tube placement allows you to do this. The second one is basically in front of the bracket. There, including the fans, we got another 47mm worth of radiator area until we start hitting the potential GPU, or about 72 total if you wanted to know the whole number. Of course, assuming that there is an actual GPU that it is trying to hit. Like if you got a water-cooled GPU, which is shorter than your ATX motherboard, you can basically stack it until you start hitting the front glass. And this side-mounted spot is actually the perfect foundation for a push-pull config without it looking like one, because you can completely hide one set of fans between the back panel and the main compartment, and then just have the red and the second set of fans on the inside. And actually, I might want to do that, just, because I can. Anyway, to finish off the cooling section, every fan and radiator spot has a dust filter. Most of them are the panel itself, like the bag. And we got an additional fabric dust filter here in the back that we can just pull out, which is fine. It's a plastic. It's like a plastic frame with a dust filter. I would have wished that there was an additional like magnetically attached one on the backside panel, because that's also an intake that would be nice and easier to clean than to clean the whole thing itself. And speaking of which, initially I was afraid that the bottom fan spots might be slightly choking, mostly because the feet take up such a huge space if you look at the online images. But actually the gap in the bottom is like a ridiculous 5 centimeters big. So no, choking is not an issue here, and as a whole, with the bottom and the side fans as intake and the top and single back fan as exhaust, the case seems to be working perfectly fine with the setup I got here. No smoke buildup, it goes in as quickly as it comes out, and generally, as for the airflow, I'm happy with the setup here. Then we also got some honorable mentions, like the little box of mounting screws, which is just neat, and the GPU anti-sag bracket, or both, because there are 2 of them in case you need 2, or if you want to sandwich your frame generator. Cable management wise, I'm pretty happy as well. We got holes all around the case, including sidewise ones for the side fans or radiator spot, and even dedicated back connector holes. So if you have a motherboard, I just don't have a motherboard to show that off, but that's an option. And as mentioned before, we got that cable stuffing container. Oh, sorry, partition design. That's pretty useful to just stuff a bunch of cable in there. We also got some cable straps on the left-hand side, so everything is pretty neat down there. The only thing I would have wished for are rubber protectors on the cable holes. That would have made it great. And oh yeah, of course you can also remove the drive cage. Additional stuffing space right there. Oh, 2. I would have also wished for the door to sit on actual hinges instead of 2 tiny pieces of metal that are just somewhat kept in their respective folds. I find this setup to fall out slightly more often than I'm comfortable with, so if you work in the case, just take it out before it folds out. Then there is one big thing, the front I/O. We got a USB 3.2 Gen 2 Type-C, 2 USB 3.0 Type-A's, a dedicated audio in and out jack, and a reset and power button. Now the I/O is perfectly fine, I really didn't mind it, but the location it caught me off guard, because it kinda limits where I would install the case. The I/O is sitting on the left side of the front foot, which in itself isn't a problem, but it means that the case is built to be sitting on a desk, which also in itself isn't a problem as well. It's just kinda big to force everybody to do that. With mini ITX cases, I don't mind in general because they are small and it's made to be sitting on top of a table. But in this case, it's kinda big to force me to do that. Take for example a Montech King 95, which is somewhat similarly sized. And there we got the I/O in the front at the top, which makes sense. It allows for both floor and table setups. But here it's kinda table only, or you got an incredibly hard to access I/O. On the other hand, I would be able to start the PC, because the power button is really big, so I would be able to start the PC with like my toe. Maybe having it at the bottom is a feature. Anyway, I feel like having it there is still like a heavily limiting factor for the potential buyer group, and having it on the already present, not doing anything metal part of the front panel, that would have made a bit more sense. But thinking about it, I really got like very few things to nag about with this case. I mean, of course the I/O placement is kind of weird if you want to look at it that way. the too often falling out cable stuffer, and DarkFlash pretending as if 140mm fans do not exist. Other than that, the case is perfectly fine. DarkFlash thought about so many little things like the extra toolbox, anti-vibration rubber here, GPU anti-sag brackets, the airflow functions perfectly fine, no buildup, and the bottom isn't restrictive at all, and the build quality is great. It's the only not so perfect area I found is the plastic part of the top panel. That one is kind of wiggly, but other than that, everything is perfectly fine. And I really gotta give credit for how extremely DarkFlash stuck with that angle design. Angled freaking everywhere. Now, of course, that's a design choice. You may like it or not, and that's entirely up to you. Just keep in mind that this thing notoriously hates coffee mugs. And price-wise, the DY470 ARGB goes for about 143 euros right here and now, or 128 if you choose it without any fans. In the US, it's slightly less expensive. I found it for about 125 USD on Amazon, which I think is a somewhat okay price. I like to compare this thing to something like the Montag 95 Pro. It's slightly less expensive and it has edges instead of round corners, which is a design choice. So for me, it's definitely a recommendation if you are into this type of design. Sure, I would have loved to see 140mm fans fit in the bottom at least, but yeah, as a whole, considering what you're getting and how well it is made, I think it's a solid choice. But okay, this should be everything on the DarkFlash DY470, and at this point a huge thank you to DarkFlash for sending this over. Oh, on a side note, we have a Discord server, so if you want to join, the link is down below. And we got channel membership, so if you are planning to sell your soul for an RG poop emoji, that's one way to go. But if not, I'm also releasing the content to all members 2 or 3 weeks in advance. Except for the NDA stuff, because, you know, I don't want to get sued. Additionally, you can rest assured that the income will not only keep the channel afloat, but will also serve to send DarkFlash the mounting hold standard for 140mm fans. They do exist, and they have to know about them. Anyway, thank you for watching, and if you want to keep going, take a look at our take on the Corsair 3500X ARGB. I worked on the review for the Corsair right before this one, and the differences are just astonishing. I still can't believe somebody greenlit that case. Anyway, hope to see you on the next one. Bye bye.